Hey, before we start this episode, I want to let you know that my book, Bare Naked Bravery: How to Be Creatively Courageous, is releasing into the world in paperback, hardback, audiobook, and ebook format on January 28th, and I want you to have a copy of it. Go to barenakedbravery.com to learn all about it, and let's get into this episode. I'm kind of nervous about sharing this conversation because our guest today is one of my personal performance coaches. She is amazing, and in the same breath, I know she knows things about me, my performance, and how I show up in the world that I don't always reveal to every audience. Vicki Ambinder is with us today, and even though I'm a little nervous, like I said, about opening up this discussion to y'all, I mean, she knows so much about me and the inner workings of how my art goes. I'm still excited about this. I'm excited because Vicki has some seriously amazing tools to share with you guys about how to connect with an audience, how to stay in your zone of genius during a performance, and how to practice things that are difficult. And all of those things relate directly into being brave, and therefore, obviously, this podcast, which is precisely why I asked her if she would join us today on today's episode. And I'm so glad she said yes. Because she maintains a very high level of privacy with all of her clients, that is one of the reasons why we're using me as a guinea pig. So a lot of the examples that we talk about are me, because I'm giving her the freedom to talk about me and on air with you guys. Vicki Ambinder is based in Portland, Oregon, and so is the majority of her and I's sessions together, although our most recent ones, now that I live in Washington, and during my time in Atlanta, all of those were done online, which is really great. However, Vicki and I first met because she randomly picked me as a guinea pig for a performance coaching session that she gave, like a masterclass that she gave to the Far West Folk Alliance Regional Conference just over last year. And Vicki is really good at what she does. She's been at it for nearly 40 years by helping musicians and bands improve and enhance their life and studio performing skills and generally work towards their artistic goals. She is a CD pre-production consultant and does studio vocal tracks production for independent and self-producing recording artists. She also just works internationally. She teaches at workshops, music conferences, camps, festivals, music organizations, the whole gamut. She also posts some pretty cool in-depth conversations about performance with artists on her blog. So if you are interested in kind of gleaning some more of Vicki's wisdom nuggets, then I would recommend you go check that out. All the links for that are in the show notes for this episode. I'm so excited for this. Get ready, buckle up. This is going to be a good one. You're listening to Bare Naked Bravery, a weekly podcast hosted by me, Emily Ann Peterson. As a singer-songwriter, author, teaching artist, and creative entrepreneur, I encounter some really fascinating stories. I'm on a mission to reveal the depth and width of bravery and its benefits to creatives like yourself. More than ever today, our world needs bravery, unique bravery, from everyone. This is the place where you find it. There is no script or censorship today because that's how these facets of Bare Naked Bravery are in real life. So if you're listening with little ears nearby, please know that some episodes may contain mature language and subject matter. One of the easiest ways you can share bravery with the world is to send this episode to a friend or two. Send them an email, text, or tweet, tag them in one of my Instagram posts, my handle is Emily Ann Pete, or leave us a review on iTunes. It takes seconds and can be done from your phone right now. Again, we need more bravery in the world, so let's be brave together. This is going to be fun.
Yeah.
I can tell.
It's weird being on the other side of the microphone. I'm usually the one interviewing people, so
yeah, because when with your blog you're interviewing people, but also in your sessions you are the one cracking open the walnuts.
Yes.
So, haha.
It's true.
So I'm excited to have you on the show for the reasons we already mentioned before we started recording, but specifically because the last session you and I had, I realized was so much about the stuff I talk about with bravery and on this podcast all the time. And yet there were things that, yes, I knew vaguely, like I knew in my head, but there was something that happened in our session that made it sink deeper. And we were talking a lot about finding the physical feeling of being in that zone of genius and how to know how to lock into that physical feeling even in the midst of a performance.
Yes.
So yeah, that's what you're here to do. Talk about it some more, but on a more public way. Do you have any opening thoughts?
Yes, now I'm remembering what we talked about. Yeah, well, I think the idea behind it, I feel very strongly that we can learn to exercise and develop muscles around recognizing what feels true and what is connecting on a profound level for us as artists. There's a way that something lands in your body when it feels true, when something you say or express or hear or experience is true. And it just feels different. It just feels like it's connecting more to the core, and it just kind of lands with a solid sort of clunk in the body. And so the work of the artist, I think, is to develop the muscles around learning to recognize that feeling and knowing when it happens and learning what the conditions are that are going to make you more likely to get there as well. So when you are tackling something in your artistic expression that is outside of your comfort zone, just because it's outside of your comfort zone doesn't mean that it's not true. And oftentimes, the more uncomfortable is the more true. You've probably experienced something along those lines.
Totally. And in fact, like, one of the reasons why we had that session was because I recognized that I was outside of my zone of genius during a performance that I asked you to observe and take notes and then give me comments on afterwards. But the experience of being in that performance showed me that I didn't have that comfort in the midst of a bizarre context.
Yes. Right? And then you did notice when you got into some of the material that you felt was more prepared and that you felt you had a deeper connection to, that you were able to get to that place. And that's why oftentimes when people come to me and they say, I have stage fright, or I have nerves, or I don't have fun when I'm performing. Can you help me with techniques around that? And certainly there's relaxation techniques I can help people with, visualization. Some people try beta blockers, that kind of thing. I'm not in any position to recommend or not recommend any of that. But it's been my experience over the, long years that I've been doing this work that preparation really is the key to feeling the most mastery on the stage. You have a plan, you know what you're intending to do, you understand kind of at a cellular level what your material is about. And I have found that resolves stage fright for people because they feel like they have a mission and they know how to accomplish it.
So some background on what we're talking about. This performance happened at this year's Far West Conference, Folk Alliance Regional West, right? Is that Far West? It's a folk conference. There are sessions during the days, and in the evenings after the official concerts, all of the songwriters and artists go up to a certain floor and take turns playing little mini concerts for each other and all of the other venue representatives present at the conference. And it is total mayhem. I mean, it's organized mayhem because everybody knows which hotel room they need to be in. Like, the entire floor is blocked off with these guerrilla showcases, basically. And It's loud. People are going into your performance for like half a song and leaving. Sometimes people stay, sometimes. So it's basically, Vicki and I were talking about at our session, was that it is the epitome of the least ideal performance environment.
Which in some ways makes it the best.
Right.
You know?
Because especially if you're a venue representative, because then you can see like, oh, wow, this person really handles hagglers really well, or this person can really project over a lot of volume, or wow, this person would be really good in a very quiet, intimate setting. So it's a really good magnifying glass for your performance skills. And the particular session or particular performance that Vicki watched, there were a lot of distractions happening for me. There was some weird stage dynamic that shouldn't have been there. There was partially weird audience dynamic. And then not to mention just the normal, quote unquote, normal stuff that was happening in these guerrilla showcases of people coming in and coming out. And there's lots of noise in the hallway. And you're supposed to miraculously make this beautiful connection with your audience who is like there to be distracted pretty much.
And there could be one person and there could be 25 people.
Totally. So I had this, like, as a performer, I had this experience during all of this that I was so acutely aware of the fact that I was getting thrown off my game. Normally, in the past, I've been really reliant on lead sheets or having my lyrics in front of me, which personally I'm okay with, but I do know how for an audience that can be distracting to watch me reading something off of a page. It's a distraction for them.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been really working on memorizing my lyrics, and I brought my lyrics with me just in case, and I had them to the side, and then all these distractions started happening. So then I was like singing to the side of the stage because I'm reading off of my lyrics anyways because I'm distracted and I don't want to forget the lyrics. And then I was like, screw it, let's move the lyrics in the center. And so I was totally thrown and felt really flustered, but there were these pockets of sanity where I really found that trueness that you're talking about, that like what I am saying and what I am telling you and what I am singing to you is the absolute truth about this. And that feeling really did lock in for those songs.
Yes. And those are ones that you've had deep process work on, I think, and that it's a sense of being sort of unshakable. You're grounded in that preparation, so you can't be tipped over. You're planted in it. And that makes it sound kind of over-rehearsed, but what it really allows is for the spontaneous to happen in the moment in a way that's not scary. It's more exciting and what's possible. And then you can riff on what you know. It's sort of like, the great improvisers in jazz. They don't just improvise based on instinct. They know all of their scales. They know all of their keys. They know all the theory, so that when they get into that moment, they can be grounded in what they know and take off. It's sort of seems like a contradiction in terms, but it really is true.
It's very much in language acquisition. Improvisation is the final stage.
Yes.
Right. You aren't able to carry on a conversation organically with someone until you've reached like the epitome of I am fluent in this language. If you don't know a lot about grammar or how to spell things or how to communicate in that language, the improvisation in that language gets really difficult. So totally true. You have to know the ins and outs of all of the pieces in order to see in an instant how they fit together, which is really what improvisation is about.
Yes, I like the idea of, I've never really thought of it this way, but of being fluent in your material. That makes so much sense to me.
You can thank Dr. Suzuki. I'm a Suzuki cello teacher, so that's a Suzuki thing.
That's why it sounds kind of familiar. That makes sense. Yes. Yeah. Yes.
His philosophy on how everyone has the capability to be an artist and be a communicator and play with beautiful tone. That was his words for those things. He really believed that it is all about language and repeating the words and the sounds and the tones that you really enjoy, which is what you're saying here, which is that like if you repeat over and over and over again that sense of trueness, then performing that trueness in an instant is so easy, second nature.
Yeah, because you recognize when it's true, you recognize the feeling of it being true. It's a technique that I definitely was trained in as an actor and a director, that you're playing a character, but there's a truth that you have to find in the character, or you'll never convince anybody, let alone yourself. I'm always talking about, in my master classes, I'm always talking about put on your own oxygen mask first, and then assist the audience. I mean, you have to be in the true place yourself, or you're never going to get it across to the audience. And so I think I had told you after, when we were talking about your showcase, I could tell when you found it. Your body was different, your voice was different, everything was different. It just settled in to a place that was grounded and was also ready for the spontaneous to happen. I mean, I could, I'm sitting there and I'm going, oh, there it is. She found it,
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the audience might not be as skilled at understanding the mechanics of what's going on, but they'll definitely, even on a subconscious level, understand that there's truth being told.
Mm-hmm. That happens all the time. It's like the goosebump moments as an audience member where you realize, oh, I'm getting it. Mm-hmm. The goosebumps physically happen when something that we're not expecting happens.
Yes.
And sometimes when we watch an artist get into that truth and they haven't been in the truth, that's when those moments of goosebumps happen, because you're subconsciously acknowledging, whoa, there it is.
Yes. Yeah. You can see it, you can hear it, you can feel it, practically all the five senses are going there, because there is that moment of universality, connection, the humanness of it. And that's why, a lot of the work that I do with my clients is about sort of you do have to get out of your comfort zone a little bit and explore and challenge, not just challenge yourself skill-wise, developing your chops, you obviously have to do that, but challenge yourself to recognize how much you don't know, even about your own material. And there was this woman I used to know who was a therapist, and she told me once that she uses quite often the phrase, fear knows the best restaurants in town, which makes so much sense to me. The place that you're afraid of going to, that's where the good stuff is. So ask fear where the restaurants are, those are good restaurants over there. And so I often think about that when, I'm challenging a client a little bit to go past the first impulse, and dig a little deeper and see where that material might have been generated from, either your own material or material that you're covering, because the deeper the roots are, the sturdier the tree, right? To mix our metaphors a little bit here, the wind's not going to blow it down. So if your roots are nice and deep, you're in a situation where there's a lot of distraction, or there's things that the sound isn't right, or somebody's talking or whatever. Your roots are so deep that you're not going to get blown over.
And this stuff that we're talking about, so I'm getting ready to publish my first book, Bare Naked Bravery, How to Be Creatively Courageous. I'm really excited about it and so terrified.
Yes.
Because there's a thesis in the book that, I'm not Brene Brown. I don't have a PhD in psychology. I'm not a counselor. I'm not a therapist. I'm just a acute observer of how I've experienced bravery and how I've seen it happen in my clients and my students and all that. And so there's three main ingredients of bravery. The first is vulnerability. The second is imagination. And the third is improvisation. And that's what we're talking about here. And there's this three sub-ingredients of improvisation, which is friction, which is this like fear knows the best restaurants in town. Friction, using friction as a tool using your intuition or that internal guidance system as a tool, and also your power of choice, which is like the when do I act, how do I act on this impulse, and not being a victim of your situation and your surroundings, right?
Yes.
So, but it's like really big topics, not tiny little things that we're talking about. But
well, like I always say, if it was easy, everyone could do it, right?
touche.
Or even everyone would do it. So, and they don't.
It's true.
So, yeah.
I think there's a stat that's like 81% of Americans want to write a book, and only 1% of them do.
Yeah.
1% of those 81% do, which is like even less than 1% of Americans. So, and there's a lot of books out there, but still.
Yeah.
I think when we're talking about this book and putting things out there in the world, whether it's on a stage or as a business owner or as a creative or an artist, that gut level sense of knowing who and what you are and what you think about a situation, a given situation, is crucial.
Yes.
It's crucial. So this is not just stage application. This is also like everything else, which I know that your sessions with your clients work on, yes, the daily, like the techniques of how do you not wear a hat on stage because it's annoying. But it's also like the philosophical sense of knowing that happens as an artist.
Yes. Yes. I'm always saying to my clients, especially when I start working with them, but often it bears reminding them that the work that I do is not about me being a big old expert. It's about being the advocate for the artist to help them identify what their artistic sensibilities are and what their artistic goals are, and then advocating for them on reaching those goals. And so I'm always saying, I mean, you could talk to anybody that I work with, I'm always saying, if this doesn't feel right to you, then trust yourself and tell me that it's not right for you. And I not only am okay with that, but I encourage it, because that's part of developing your muscles as an artist, is understanding your own artistic sensibility. And as far as sort of my own bravery over the years, it has evolved to mean that I don't know, part of it is sort of being a woman in a consulting type situation or an advocating situation where you kind of you feel like you have to sort of know everything to be legitimate. But over time, certainly over the years, my practice has evolved from me needing to have all the answers to getting out of the way and letting the process emerge from the client's point of view. And that's taken a lot of sort of courage on my part to understand that that's actually a much more valuable and valued place to come from for my clients. And it really doesn't have anything to do with me, So, I mean, I need to, obviously I need to have skills and know what questions to ask and, keep the big picture in mind and contain the space for the client and all those things, make it safe and productive. But it's not about all the things that I know. And so in one very profound way, sort of letting go of that really freed me up to be a much better practitioner. And it's a bit of a challenge because in my field, there's no specific training you go through. There's no degree that you get in college. When I started doing this, there were hardly any people out there doing this work. It was difficult for me to even find a mentor, let alone any training or any supervision or anything like that, And so I've had to sort of invent all my practices and all my methodology. And you can feel like you're on shaky ground sometimes, But then over the years, seeing how clients have developed and grown through the work, you're allowed to sort of then understand that, really the creatively courageous thing to do here is to put it more, step out of the picture more and make the growth be about the client and not about me.
Totally. And what's really funny is you and I are friends on Facebook. And the other day I posted a tiebreaker question, which was my publicist and I are disagreeing. We're not disagreeing. We just were kind of like, we don't know which book cover to use. So put a poll up on Facebook and got a lot of opinions.
Yes.
Polarizing opinions too. The part of like asking that kind of question required me to let go of my ego I first had to assume that I didn't know the right answer. But what I found was really interesting was that the cover choice we landed on was the one that there was two physical poses. One was like really open and free, and one was kind of closed off and hands crossed on my chest. And the one we went with was the hands crossed on my chest because part of that is being brave. Like you have to have boundaries in order to be strong and vulnerable at the same time.
And it's also a bit of a challenging, it's a challenge. It's like, I'm challenging you. When you get into that stance, it's sort of like, okay, you convinced me, prove it to me,
Yeah.
And what I found interesting about reading all those comments was it revealed more about the person making the comment than it did about the cover of the book. So.
Totally. What was really fascinating to me was because, one option was, in my opinion, was more feminine, one was more masculine. And I was concerned about dissuading my friends or fans or future audience members that were more masculine, whether they were male or female, doesn't matter. But I was kind of spot on with that because I went back through and was like, oh, wow, all of my lovey-dovey sensitive friends chose this one option, and then all of my like strong badass friends all chose this other option.
Not that being lovey-dovey isn't strong, right?
Totally. And I just thought it was so fascinating because that is a really good example of a very concrete example of when you are putting your art out there, your audience is going to take it in and receive it in a certain way. Some of that has more to do with them than it does with your performance.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But you also attract or detract your audience based on how you're performing something.
Yeah. And it was a sort of an act of bravery in terms of putting something out there that's not finished. I mean, you are going to be finishing it, but it's not at this point. And you're saying, here are two works in progress, and one of which is going to be completely discarded, and that's, I mean, I always find it so amazing when I use this example a lot, that stand-ups go to the comedy club and do developing material. They just go out there and see how it flies, and they're using it just purely to find out what's working and what isn't working. And it's not anything about, I'm worried that people are going to think I'm terrible if I do this stuff. I mean, it's just so brave to me, That
makes me want to crawl into a hole.
I know, but there's no other way to know, other than doing it. And, and that's why, of course, a lot of people come to me because they're tired of their friends and their family telling them how great they are. They're just like, I'm not getting real information here. And so when they come to me, they're like, I really need to hear the truth. And I'm constantly saying to them, what feels right to you? What feels true to you? I mean, I can certainly say, oh, I'm not really understanding that song or something. Maybe let's dig into it a little bit more. So more of it is coming across, so that what you're trying to do is coming across. But really, it's about, most of the time, they already know the answers. They know. They just need a safe space to tell the truth.
I am so excited for what I'm about ready to tell you. The book that I have been working on for the past year, 2 years, featuring stories that I have undergone in my whole life. The book, Bare Naked Bravery, How to Be Creatively Courageous, is releasing into the world January 28th of 2018. And I am so terrified and so thrilled and just so excited about all of it. I am really pumped about what's inside of the book. I know that the rest of the world needs to hear it because it is stuff that we have talked about on this podcast so many times. If you are new to the podcast, welcome. We are so glad to have you. This is a wonderful community that has been born out of this research that I started when I started writing this book. The conversations that we've featured here on this podcast are like the breadcrumbs that I've followed to create and write this book. Bare Naked Bravery, How to Be Creatively Courageous will be available in hardback, paperback, audiobook, and ebook on January 28th at Amazon. And I want you to have the ebook for free. So sign up if you're listening to this episode before January 28th. Sign up by going to barenakedbravery.com or to my own website, emilyannpeterson.com, and you can sign up to get your free copy there. If you are listening to this episode after the book is launched, welcome. We're so glad to have you. There is still excitement happening at both of those sites. You can always download your Bravery bundle at barenakedbravery.com. It is free. It has a bunch of really cool things involved in it, or inside of it. Not just involved in it, but inside of it. I want you to be part of this. I'm so excited, and let's celebrate. I want to dive into some more examples and use a couple of your master classes that I've been to, but you can also use others that you have done publicly that I haven't attended. But I've seen you do 2 master classes now, where you basically pick your victims at random.
Brave volunteers.
Brave volunteers. You pick your brave volunteers, 2 or 3, depending on how long the masterclass is, and then do like a mini session in front of everyone. So it is kind of a brave thing to do that in the first place. The first time you and I met, I was one of those guinea pigs.
I pushed you pretty good too, I think.
You did? What do you remember from that?
Oh, I think I just remember challenging you to not, and I could be remembering this wrong because I do so many of these, but I think I pushed you to not worry about it being so pretty and to, just to kind of push more. And does that sound right?
Yeah, it does. And the way that it came across was when I first got up and sang the first bit of my song that we were working on. The audience was wider than it was long. And so I was singing like a sprinkler.
Yes.
Like an old school, like sprinkler. So like going back and forth like a spray across the audience. And your suggestion to me was stand in one place and sing the song to one direction. Which is not something that I know that that's not something that you suggest to everyone.
Right.
But it worked.
It did. It really made what was getting put out there much more powerful, concentrated, focused, and yes. And obviously that is not something I would recommend you do all the time to all your songs, but it's an experience of getting to know what that feels like to have really strong focus. And if you have that strong focus, if you understand how that feels, and again, you're developing those muscles and it feels true, then you can direct your attention in other ways, but maintain the focus. It can be uncomfortable, because we all as performers get our muscle memory in a rut, and we are used to doing things a certain way. And oftentimes when I'll ask folks to try something new, it's like it doesn't even compute. Like one exercise is to play the song but speak the lyrics instead of singing it. And 9 times out of 10, the person can't remember the lyrics when they're just speaking them because they're used to processing it through the brain in a certain way. And so if we can build up more synapses in the brain, there's just a wealth of more ways of processing the information through. And so, yes, I do remember that. And I also remember, because you have such a good high belting voice, I remember wanting you to just embrace that, and just kind of go for it and not worry about being too pretty, because you have a very pretty voice and you also have a very strong voice.
Yeah. I agree. And you're right. Like sometimes I get caught up in the this should sound good. And so then the power gets sacrificed.
Yeah. And maybe some authenticity. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Okay, so let's give me another example from a master class that kind of proved some of this stuff, like either a tool or a...
Yeah. Well, a lot of the work that I do on helping my clients develop their material, because like one of the things that I do is I work with people on getting ready to go into the studio. And so the pre-production phase of their recording projects, especially if they're self-producing or they're independent, they don't have a label, is kind of helping with all that.
For someone who is not familiar with any of that, what is like from start, I think I have a song, to it is on iTunes? What are the different stages that...
Okay. Well, I can tell you through the way that I'm working with folks. Typically, someone will come to me and they'll say, I really want to do a record, or I want to do my next record, or I want to do it differently than I did it last time. And so we will start by going over all the material they're considering. Usually, if they want to do a 12-song disc, I will recommend they come to me with at least 20 songs. We will then kind of pare it down. But actually, before that, there's a whole exploration process of really, what do you want your listeners to know about you from this record? What do you want to say about yourself as an artist? If it's not your first record, what do you want to say about your progression as an artist from your first record to your second record to your third record? A lot of times the first record is sort of like, this is everything I have. I'm just going to throw it on a record. It's my first record. The second record seems to be more about, okay, now I'm going to make a really, more particular statement about myself as an artist. And then the third record is sometimes the hardest one to figure out, because you kind of feel like you might have sort of done everything you're supposed to do in the second record, and now the third record is there's a lot more pressure to have it mean something. And so I find that I'm working with a lot of people on their third records because they're sort of lost, they just don't know where to go with it. So we'll go through that exploration process. We'll talk about where the material is at. A lot of times I'll say, I don't think you have the material yet, try writing more about this, that, and the other thing, or try exploring these kinds of maybe time signatures or maybe, keys or different voicings, because we want to, think in different ways. They'll come back, they've got more stuff. We'll pare it down again, and then we'll do the deep dive into the material. And that's really the main part of the pre-production phase for me. Pre-production meaning before you go and get into the studio to produce your record. And so we will really kind of mercilessly pick the songs apart, and in a way that is only going to enrich what happens in the studio, because of course with a record we can't see the person, so we have a lot of the information cut off, and so it has to come across in the audio. So by the time we're done really deep diving into that material, which means really understanding the mission of each song, what's the creative nugget of each song, what wants to come across, what I always say it comes down to two questions: what do I want to say and how do I want to say it? Really, that's kind of sums all of it up. Then by the time you're going into the studio, you have this so firmly understood that you can not only feel confident about what your mission is, but then you can also kind of take leaps from there while you're in the studio and make new discoveries. And then a lot of what I do is go into the studio after they've done the instrument tracks and produce their vocal tracks for them. And if they're self-producing.
Why is that? Because that's not something everyone does.
Right.
But why is that something that's important?
It's so important and it's so valuable because we've done all this work on the pre-production side. So we've got a sort of shorthand figured out. And so when the person is recording the vocal tracks, they're not thinking about anything but making the vocal performance. They're not thinking about the producer side of things at all. They're trusting in me to be advocating for them on what they're trying to get and pinpointing that and really being very directed about, okay, I think we have what we need on the first verse except for this last line, so we're going to go back and get the last line. And then you're also not wasting a lot of time going back and listening, going back into the booth and going back and listening, going back into the booth. And, there's just somebody who's just kind of keeping things on track and also knows how to get the performance out of you that you're trying to get.
The way that I describe it or have described it is that Computers do one job, and that is to process the commands that you have given it.
Mm-hmm.
They cannot do both.
Yeah.
At the same time. And so when you are in the studio with the headphones and the mic in front of you, your job is to be the computer executing the original idea.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. And finding the other things, finding the moments that, since you're so prepared, you're ready to, like we talked about, find the spontaneous moment that brings it into another level. And if I'm there producing for you, I used to be a record producer. I used to produce the whole project, and I'm not doing that these days simply because coaching is, what I'm doing. And so
you're in your zone of genius.
So, and it just takes way more time than I really have. But the vocal tracks producing is something that is a natural sort of, along the continuum of the work that I'm doing with my clients, where we've done all this developmental stuff, and then we're just taking it and applying it in the studio. And since I do have the background of being a studio producer and also being a director, I know how to get performances out of people, and I know what the artist is going for since we've done all that work. So it's really very efficient, and also kind of a safe feeling for the artist, where they're like, okay, she's got my back. I can take some leaps here, and I can also apply what we've already figured out.
And if you are not a recording artist or a visual artist or a business owner, and this stuff still applies to you too.
Yes.
Like, there are going to be elements of your business that you are an expert in, but when you are an expert in that area of your business, it is very difficult to see how that plays a role in the big picture of your business.
Yes.
So bringing in a coach or an expert or somebody else or a friend to advise you, or being part of a mastermind group, is super important, because you can go, hey guys, I just did this thing. You know what I'm trying to go for. Does this apply?
Mm-hmm.
Is this what we're going for? Okay, good, great. Or, oh, you're right. No, I'm going to go back and do it again, or do it differently, or add something else. So it's so valuable, regardless of what artistic medium you're using. It's really valuable to use community and connection that you trust.
Yes.
To help you use that friction in the moment.
No, it's really true. And I know a lot of really wonderful artists, like, internationally touring artists who have made 1 million records and who play with many, many different kinds of people. And they're very fine producers themselves. Rarely do they produce their own work. It doesn't make sense. It would not make sense to somebody to do that, because you need that collaboration. And not to knock engineers, because engineers are wonderful at what they do, but they're not always producers. They're not, there's a difference.
What would be the difference between an engineer and a producer?
Typically, there are producing engineers, so I'm not going to say that there aren't, because there are, and there are some wonderful ones. They're not always the people that independent artists can afford to work with. So a lot of times they'll go in and they'll have a pretty good idea of what they want to do, and they'll work with an engineer, but the engineer is not really doing the producer's duties. The producer is in a studio is sort of similar to a director on a film set, where they are executing an artistic vision and dealing with all the elements that go into that. And so the producer is, there's a lot of different schools of thought about what a producer should and shouldn't be doing. Some people will hire a certain producer because they don't know what they want, and they just want the producer to put their stamp on it. Others will want to work very closely with the producer in terms of, this is what I have in mind. Can you help me get there? Because I wouldn't know how to get there. And then there's sort of every shade in between. Engineer is really responsible for setting the mics, capturing the signal, capturing the sound, editing usually, and mixing in certain phases. And so they are really, really good at that stuff, and maybe aren't the best. And again, I don't want to malign any specific engineers out there, because there are people who are very good at this, but there are also, they would be the first to tell you that they are not skilled at getting performances out of people. They don't know what to say. I mean, there's really a skill set involved because it's not just, and it's the same thing with performance coaching. Anybody can look at somebody and go, oh, they're doing this or they're doing that, and that doesn't look right or whatever. Some people actually don't ever see those things, but a lot of people can see those things. But it's not just recognizing what needs to be adjusted. It's knowing how to adjust it. And it's not just knowing how to adjust it. It's knowing what to say to get to the adjustment. And so there's a whole bunch of skills around that.
Totally. To use that producer engineer example in business, that would be like me. If I were to go to my engineer and ask them a production question, that would be like me as a business owner going to my bookkeeper and asking them a strategy question.
Yeah.
My bookkeeper is very skilled at entering the transactions and knowing how that relates to the IRS.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But when I ask my bookkeeper about a marketing question or about a strategy question in general, I mean, they have some expertise to offer, like they have a facet of information to offer back to me, but they are not a full mirror for me to use.
Yes.
It's like looking at my forehead. I can see that my forehead is a little bit tense in the face if I ask it one question, but I can't actually see that it's excited versus, angry or something.
Yes.
So that's how I would describe the difference between producer and engineer. And it's also, because it relates to business in that regard, it's really important to, if you are seeking outside advice, to ask yourself why you're asking that person for advice and direction, and if their answer would be biased in a certain form or reason,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think so much of, I'm sure what you do and what I do is about building a trust relationship. And, I'm certainly not a therapist, but there's something therapeutic in nature around it because you are building a relationship based on trust. And the people that I've been working with, I have clients I've been working with for years, they, we not only have all that water under the bridge, but we just have an efficient relationship, where the client will know that I'm seeing through some kind of defense, and we just don't have to go through that process of pointing it out, tearing it apart. There's a recognition involved in it. And so working with somebody in whatever capacity, you just know how it feels. You have a mechanic that you trust, because they're not going to rip you off. You have a landscaper or whatever. I'm talking like you're a rich person, but you know what I mean? There's just somebody that...
The hairdresser.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, big one right there, Yeah.
I don't let just anybody cut my hair.
Yeah. You're not going to make me look like a freak. You understand the things I'm scared of, and then the things that really excite me. And, that's true. That's a very therapeutic relationship right there. Definitely. And they can help you be brave to try something new.
Totally.
And reassuring and all that too. Yeah.
Totally. Well, this has been so fantastic. First of all, I just want to say in front of everyone how much I appreciate the work that you and I have done together. And no, it hasn't been a whole lot, but I appreciate having somebody that I can trust. And I encourage you guys, if you don't have someone that you can trust for your career, for whatever, to find that person, because it's so helpful to even just touch base occasionally and go, am I on course? Am I doing true? Is
Yes.
this what true feels like? Yes. Okay, great. Okay.
Well, and I appreciate working with you, even though it's so uncomfortable for me to talk about because I don't ever talk about working with my clients, but you said I could. So I appreciate working with you because you are very courageous. I mean, you go for it, and that is where the best stuff is. Like we said, you might as well. I mean, I'm always using that phrase with people. Hey, you might as well, You might as well show up. You might as well do the work. You might as well make the most of it. And when you're on stage, you might as well go big. So a lot of that is sort of going back to the first thing we were talking about is really, finding those, exercising and developing those muscles of what is true and what feels right so that when you go to that might as well place, you are doing what you intend to do, because intentionality and authenticity they go hand in hand with all of this stuff. And so, yeah, you might as well be intentional and authentic and true.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Amen. Amen. This is awesome. Thank you for joining us. This has been really fantastic.
My pleasure.
I'm probably going to have you back on the show. Let's just be honest. Your brave takeaway from today's show is to share in the Bare Naked Bravery community, our Facebook group, about this last time you remember being unshakable in your truth. And maybe you want to also do a little bit of stream of consciousness writing around that memory too. I have a feeling there'll be some other things that bubble up if you do that. Regardless, Vicki and I would love to hear all about your favorite parts of today's Bare Naked Bravery. You can find both of us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and I just ask that if you have some woohoo to offer to the episode or an amen to share, just go ahead and tag us so that she and I can give you back a woohoo or a cheer in exchange. Again, all of our links are in the show notes for this episode over at barenakedbravery.com. If you are ever looking for anything regarding a specific subject or featuring another guest that we've had in the past, and you're trying to find that on the website, there's a search bar right on the homepage. So you can just type in Vicki's name and she'll pop right up. That's the show this week. Thank you so much for listening. I know there's so much stuff that you could be listening to, and I don't take it lightly that you chose this to listen to, and I am really grateful. So please join us on the Bare Naked Bravery Facebook community. If you haven't yet, download your Bare Naked Bravery bundle of goodies. It is available for free, and it's got a bunch of really cool, wonderful things. So go to barenakedbravery.com and you can download that right away. If you are digging the music in today's episode, that is because it's brought to you by Lee Rosevere. I'm so glad that his music is being featured in this season of the show. I really love his stuff, and you should go check it out if you so desire. If you want to find out more about all the other artists, musicians, and other sponsors of the show, go visit barenakedbravery.com, and we've got a resource list filled with all of the books and music and things that have been featured on the show in episodes previous. So I am so looking forward to being with you next week. We have some awesome things in store for you. And until then, I have one message for you. It's this: be yourself, be vulnerable, be brave, because the world needs more of your bare naked bravery.